Okay, thanks, guys. To start this workshop, I wanted to first thank Ryan and Company. Doug has come up here twice and met with me and the CB Richard Ellis team and trying to work towards what they're trying to do, which they have been working on this for a long time. They have a lease. They have Wells Fargo trying to push in this uncertain, Marty, you're aware of this financial market. And, what we started with Doug was, tough conversations. We got to step back and see what's best for JEA. And he has been a good partner in these discussions. Also want to thank Mike and Stu at CB Richard Ellis from I don't know how many meetings that we've had, but it's been a lot. Stuart says, "You ready to go?" I said, "I'll go." So on Mother's Day morning, we were meeting. So we've been meeting almost every other day trying to get something that makes sense to look at today. So I just want to thank both Mike and Stu for all their efforts and time on this thing. Also wanted to thank Nancy Kilgo, who's been working on this from the beginning. And I was fortunate enough to work with Nancy when I was at the JEA before, and she's as good as she was back then and tireless worker. So I just want to thank all three groups for what they've done, how they've moved this process forward. On, what we try to do, what I try to get everybody to look at today is quickly go through what we have today and why we should look at, moving forward with the new building. But I always think it's important to look at where we are today. And I'm going to get Stu to walk through that. Then look at different options. But the starting point was, what is important. And, I can tell you just, Vicky Cavey, who's come and joined Paul, has been helping me think through, what do we want to do at JEA? And, I first started looking at how could we get project economics how could we value engineers this building to the lowest cost? And, Vicky says to me a couple times, "You aren't hearing John Baker. You aren't hearing Paul McElroy." And, the employees are the most important. JEA's culture is the most important. And it really hit me that she's right. And safety, Joe and Tom have, put in my mind that, those are, as we're putting this puzzle back together, is important. Security and project economics are important, and business continuity is important. So, those kind of base. But I'll tell you a quick story to tell you how the JEA culture has come back and how you can quickly see what Paul McElroy has done. We were sitting in a meeting with Ryan and CB Richard Ellis, and we were talking about small things in the building that were important, but I thought could take out. And Paul nudged me and he says, "Bobby, JEA culture." And he's right. So I just, working on this project, I'm sure we can make improvements. I'm sure there's opportunities here in this discussion, but I just want to tell you, getting back to what Vicky said, is the leadership of John Baker and Paul McElroy. It just feels good. And so going from there, we want to come out of this meeting to, how do we finalize this project decisions? How do we finalize, do we split this building into 152,000 feet for the headquarters building, 40,000 feet for a hardened facility? What parking requirements should we have? Should we think through being a good neighbor, and what type of resiliency we can have? So with that, I'll hand it over to Stuart, and move forward. I did not, get a moment of reflection. And if we can have a quick moment of reflection. Next is the adoption of the agenda.
Mr. Van Osdol and Mr. DeSalvo, the three of you chaired by Bobby are the committee members. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda from one of the two of you, please?
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Motion seconded.
All those in
Any
favor?
Discussion? Yeah. No discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And this is, so I'm going to just go ahead and do the Sunshine Public Record Statement. This is a WebEx video meeting that we're allowed to have consistent with the Executive Order 2069. The meeting's permitted to be conducted over communications media technology. And we are going to have a brief public comment period at the beginning of this meeting. And I'm going to let Shawn Eads walk us through how the public can participate on the front end of the meeting. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. This is Shawn Eads. With our WebEx technology, during our public comment, there are three different ways that the public can provide comment. One is through email that was part of the public notice to Madrika Jones. The public has until 9/10 to be able to provide that comment. The other one is through the WebEx technology itself, and then the other one is through the phone. So I will walk everybody through that since we've reached that moment in the meeting. So, Madrika, has there been any email public comment?
No, there haven't been any email public comments.
Thank you. Now, for those that are on the WebEx technology, if you would like to provide public comment, there are two ways for you to notify me of that. First is you can raise your hand. That is done by bringing up the participant list. If you scroll on your screen, you'll see a series of buttons at the bottom. One looks like a person. If you click on that, it brings up a large list of everyone that is on the call. You will then see your name in that list, and you'll see a gray hand. If you click on that, that will raise your hand and allow me to understand that you would like to give a comment. So if that is your intention, please do so now. If you cannot find how to raise your hand, you can also scroll down the bottom. There's a bubble icon that looks as if it was a caption. You click on that, it allows you to chat. You can also chat your intent that you would like to provide a comment, and I will recognize you. If anyone would like to provide comment, please do so. I see none. The last option for those, I believe there are about 7 people that dialed directly into this call without the WebEx technology. If you would like to provide public comment, your phone currently is on mute. You can hit *6 and please state your name and that you would wish to provide comment. If that is your intent, please do so now. With that, Chair Stein or Bobby, back to you.
So, do we need the committee charter review?
Yeah, it'll be very brief, Bobby. We're formalizing this committee in accordance with the policy manual 4.9. The guidance in the policy manual provides that staff interaction with board members is pretty limited. Primarily, the board member interacts solely with the CEO. This charter gives you the opportunity to work directly with Nancy Veazey, with each of the committee members, and it just formalizes the committee. If you'll take a look at it, the charter will actually be approved by the entire board. If there's something that we've missed as to what the charge is as far as the planning and development of the new corporate headquarters and the related facilities and the various responsibilities that we've listed there, and your meetings will be as needed, and we won't have to go through this process every time you have a workshop or you have a public meeting. But all your meetings are to be in the public if two or more of the committee members are meeting. It just formalizes the committee is what this charter is all about.
Do you need a motion or?
No, it's not an action. It was more informational. It'll be on the next meeting to finalize and approve if you guys are okay with the language in it. Thank you.
Is everybody okay?
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Bobby, I'm good.
It looks good, Bobby.
John?
Yeah, Bobby, Joe here. No issues on my end. Looks good.
John Baker? Shawn, is John on?
I'm trying to find him again to unmute him. John, I think you got him through your phone. If you can hit *6, it will unmute you. You may have gotten disconnected, Bobby.
Bobby, I'll circle back with him to make sure he doesn't have any comments, or if he has comments, I'll incorporate them.
He said he was having a hard time getting on the call. I mean, on the WebEx. So can somebody check?
We'll reach out to him, yes.
Thank you. Do you need a cell phone number, Shawn, or do you have it?
I'll get it. I can get it from Enrico.
Let me quickly give it to you. I can give it to you real quick.
Shawn?
You're on.
Shawn?
Yep.
There he
Yes,
is.
sir, we hear you now.
Okay. I could hear you all, but I couldn't see you. Still can't.
We will leave you unmuted, so you will be able to speak throughout the rest of the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
John, are you okay with the
With the committee charter? Did you have any
Yeah.
questions or thoughts?
No.
Okay. So with this, I'd like to hand it over to Stuart. Stuart, if you could walk through the old building, the operational cost, the capital cost quickly, and then we can go to how we got to where we think is a possible solution to move forward.
Sure, will do. Good morning, board members. Stuart Green, CBRE, your owner's rep. So to start, and just kind of looking at what we need real briefly, what we're asking the board for is general direction around a targeted square footage for the headquarters. Parking counts, how many spaces, targeted parking spaces you would like. Direction around resiliency, the details of which we'll get into. And then you've got obviously a pretty powerful project team, your staff that's armed with following up on the other items that will influence some of the more minor decisions. But so that's really what we're trying to get to, so that we can start to finalize all the numbers and detail and data behind our findings. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. And that's really the project focus has been, so I just explained what's on the right side of that slide. The project focus has obviously been, as Bobby alluded to earlier, the employees and JEA culture. I think I spoke last week about the fact that the program needed to converge with both design and project economics to provide you guys with the right solution. And so the employees and the culture and safety, security, all very high priorities on our work to date. Next slide, please. So we are, why was a new build recommended? So there's been a lot of work around your operational costs of your existing facility, the critical facility needs that you have right now, what those spends look like over the next 15 years, so that we can compare them to what a new building would look like in those spends. And you can see, I'm not going to read it back to you. I'm happy to if you want me to, but you can see by the data in front of you that your 15-year operational expectations of your existing building that you're sitting in right now are around $57 million. And you would compare that to the figure on your right on a new program of around $21.8 million. The bottom left, the headquarters recovery, if you were to stay in your existing building and you were to try and recover that building, and we use the word recovery because it's not the same as a new building, right? I mean, it's never going to gain the same efficiencies and the same ability for your staff that you can with a new building. But to recover it is around 65 to 78 million. That's the amount of work that has to be done to gut it and revise it for what would be considered a current workplace. Any questions so far? Okay, next slide, please.
Just a quick question, if I may. I apologize. It's Tom Van Oswald. Can you just kind of broad category itemize where we derive the efficiencies and OpEx costs between the new and the old program?
Sure. So the existing building that's been a series of exercises. We have the data behind that, right? We took the last 5 years. We've averaged that, and that's how we've come to 1.5 to 2.2 million. It varies obviously year to year, but that's your existing building. The new building programmatic expectations are based on what CBRE would see in the market and what Ryan has provided in their lease agreement with you guys, and that's based on a cost per square foot. And that number was adjusted for the new program. Does that answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, it does. I believe. I'm just trying to make sure that, and again, some of it is probably obvious in new construction, et cetera. But I just want to make sure I understand what is it about the new program that drives the savings, annual savings in OpEx?
Yeah, well, the big thing is more efficient facilities, better mechanical systems. You're taking advantage of JEA's chilled water system, and a lot of pieces like that. Your existing
elevator a big cost too, Tom. Yeah,
that's it. That gets the answer to my question. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, Stuart, Joe DeSalvo, just a little pile on from Tom's question. For the new building program, is it going to be a smart building where I just say this, had a very good visit with Buckman and Northside Power Generating, and they both said that they're looking at, they'd like to have like artificial intelligence and sensor type stuff that enables more efficient maintenance and sustainment, and alerting you to when you need to repair something instead of relying on something that's periodically scheduled when it may not be repaired or whatever. But do you know, does this design have any incorporate like AI type features to help maintain and sustain the building and operations?
Sure. Great question. Joe, your project team, the staff we've had a lot of conversations around that. There are obviously varying degrees of smart buildings, but your facility, we have a sizable investment in monitoring and getting prescriptive analytics, getting a more proactive approach to solving the needs of your facility. And so, yes, we have both in design and execution applied dollars towards making sure that we can do that.
Great. Thanks, Stuart.
Yes, sir. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so this is really a look at the 4 variants that we've kind of gone through over the last little while. The top left is obviously your existing facility. You can see from an efficiency standpoint, you're consuming 320 square feet per person. That's a number that obviously is really, really high in the industry today. Option 1, the data directly below that, is your approved program. So what JEA approved in January of 2020. And again, there was a lot of programmatic work that went behind this. You see a very sizable shift from your consumption, 320 square feet per person to 179 square feet per person. And a sizable shift in the OpEx associated with those 2 facilities. The information on the right, the program shift, is what we've done over the last month or so, and the top version is our April revisit, where we have not addressed hardening, and we have kept all the employees in one location. We have just made your program a little bit more efficient, keeping in mind still that the employees are an important piece of this, and attraction and retention of talent is still very important. So you'll see a square foot per person of 170. That's very comfortable in today's market. From a consumption basis in a headquarter facility and an office facility. So that's where we've gotten to there. And then the one below that is really what we've been working on the past couple of weeks. And it does solve for hardening. It is 2 facilities. It is a reduced headquarters of 152,000 square feet. We are moving out approximately 200 to 220 people into a separate hardened facility of roughly 40,000 square foot, and that's where we are currently with our data.
But Stuart, it'd be worth walking through some of the new facilities that you've worked on locally that had gone from 130 per person, 130 square feet per person, some 140. So this is, using what C.B. Richard Ellis has studied quite a bit of why this makes sense.
Yeah, I can tell you, as I'm sure you all can appreciate, our clients don't necessarily want to be associated with a square foot per person, but I will tell you this: we've built several facilities in the last 2 to 3 years where the consumption of square feet per person is between 130 and 150, and even lower than 130. And that is not a call center type consumption. That is an office type facility. So at 170, like I said, it's very comfortable, and it allows your project staff the ability to adjust if the data presents itself, and we can go up a little or down a little to hit the required metrics.
So 170 feet per person is probably on the upper limit of what new build is. And, CB Richard Ellis is staying on top of the virus and everything else, how they're changing their thought process, but this still gives adequate space per person.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Tom. That's what I was going to say. They're 130, 140. I'm presuming those were in a pre-COVID sort of environment. And what I like about, at least directionally, I don't know what exactly the right number, what I like about not being at sort of the lower control limit of that is it does allow for some appropriate distancing, given that we're in a new world with this virus.
Yeah, and Tom, to further that point, the distancing is important, but also there's a new thought process of a lot of people working from home. So, if you merge those two thought processes, this gives adequate space per person in our mind. Now we're going to drill down on this a little bit further, but I think it gives us something to go ahead and move forward with this project.
Bobby, this is John. I'm not looking at the slides, unfortunately, but in the current revisit of 152,000 square feet at headquarters, and then another building of 40,000 square feet, that's 190,000 square feet. That sounds like more than 170 per person.
Well, go ahead, Stu.
Yeah, John, it is departmentally, and circulation numbers roll into that. If we're looking at full-time employees, it is around 170 per person still, because there's adjustments between circulation, rentable square feet, and gross square feet, but that's the target that we currently have.
Okay, thank you.
And also, this is Tom. Perhaps you're getting to this, but is there a proposed location for the separate 40,000 square foot facility?
No. What we've decided is, look, get the 152,000 square foot building going. I think we can, in the next few weeks, drill down on, exactly what that building needs to look like. And then I think that is the discussion the board has. My suggestion is somewhere downtown. And I think we as a board should discuss, how we get to look at something we move pretty quickly on.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, and just
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, this is Dr. Haley. Do we know which employees are going into which building? Have we decided that, if we're going to go down that route? And how, what's the split?
No, sir. We know programmatically which groups we think are, and we've taken a careful blend of that data to come up with the relocation of approximately 200 to 220 people. We haven't fine-tuned that yet, because again, we're kind of cutting with an axe here to make sure that we're going in the right direction. So upon y'all's direction, then we would look further into that, Dr. Haley, and come up with the exact number and exactly who is going to the Hardin facility.
But we're pretty close. I mean, we've looked at which groups would fit into this Hardin facility.
It's appropriate for for board members who are not on the committee to ask questions. Can I ask a question?
Marty, we're all in this together.
Yeah, I guess I should have asked that too before I asked mine. I just assumed we could ask a question.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you went, because I have
No. We're all in this together, try to come up with the best solution.
And maybe this is, I appreciate all the good work that's been done. And your support, Bobby, is clear. Remind me where in this discussion the retail space lands. I've just had concerns about the retail space, and it may have been a DVI or Downtown Development Authority requirement to get it approved, but my experience with retail space in these type of buildings in downtown Jacksonville has not been very good.
That's a good point, and we talked about that. But Stuart, why don't you take that?
Yeah. So, Marty, you're exactly right. The DDRB approved a portion of your garage to have retail area on the ground floor. That is basically storefront adjacent to the sidewalk. That is still figured in your program because of those approvals. And we have certain amenities that are planned to go in that area to engage that street front.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not today, but let's have. I'd like to explore that scenario a little bit more, just because the tenant improvements for that space can be cost prohibitive to get a tenant in there. So, I mean, I understand it's probably not part of today's conversation, but let's make sure we add that to a future dialogue.
Marty, I can't agree with you more.
Okay. Okay, and I would point out on, kind of to piggyback on Tom and Bobby's prior conversation, you do have TI design that has not occurred yet. So everything we're talking about is shell and core related in these facilities, and your TI design is in the future. It's downstream of us right now. So we've got the ability to affect that 170 square foot per person and streamline exactly those people that programmatically stay and go. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think it's an important aspect to reacting to everything in the market today and going forward. You guys still have a large part of your program to design and the ability to react. So any other questions on this slide? Okay, next slide, please. So this is just really a recap of what we've kind of talked about, but the majority of the functions remain in the headquarters facility. It does allow for the hardening aspect. We still are, programmatically, we're still seeing a high value for the changes that the third option makes in your program, going to 152,000 headquarter and a 40,000 hardened facility. So we're still seeing high value for the reductions there. And this avenue still avoids significant delay and prior approvals and prior program and prior design. So that's a very important aspect to all of this. And again, it does protect those existing DDRB approvals. We'll have some more work to do for sure, but for all intents and purposes, the exterior look of the building and the work that we've done through the DDRB remains in the same shape. And finally, it does offer the highest savings given the revisions to the program and given the look at gross rent reductions over the term of your lease. Okay, next slide, please. So visually, you can see that the bottom right is your current approved program, approved in January 2020. That is a 9-story facility. And then the top left is what we're recommending going to. And you can see that from a exterior elevation standpoint, the look and the feel is pretty much the same, obviously taking the mass out of it. But any questions on this slide? Okay. Next slide, please. So when you reduce from 196,000 square feet the approved program in January, to 152,000 square feet in your headquarters. You see gross rent reduction of $27 million over the course of the lease. And the net impact of the third option from that same 196 to the third option, the hardened facility, is still between 10 and 14 million in savings.
And that's after building the 40,000 square foot building.
Correct. And then operationally, like we showed in one of the original slides, you're still seeing an operational savings during that time of approximately 19 to 35 million, depending on where we exactly land and what your solution is. Next slide, please. So the current scenario for your hardened solution is fairly fragmented, as we've seen. You have certain spaces out there that focus on certain departmental needs. You have options at your various sites, but it's not a refined program specifically to deal with a hardened need. And it has been our experience that solution changes year to year just between those various facilities. Your peers in the industry and your industry partners, the examples that they set are that the hardened facility is a separate site from your office headquarters. It is typically owned by the utility, so you have complete control of that. You have flexibility in modifying it when needed. And that in and of itself allows you, like I said, the flexibility and the consistency in how you address risk impact. Any questions on those last couple slides? Okay, next slide, please. So again, the goal here is to empower your staff with the ability to understand the general direction that they need to go, and that will allow us to maintain obviously good relationships with the developer and Ryan, and critical targets on our schedule and the milestones that we need to hit in the coming month. And those are this is the recommendation, the option 3 we looked at, that the targeted headquarter square footage would be approximately 152,000 square feet in the headquarter, and that the parking counts would be approximately 742 spaces, that we would solve for resiliency in a separate roughly 40,000 square foot facility, and that we will resolve for various other VE efforts. And keep in mind, we've kind of canvassed the entire program for opportunities in value engineering across all the different aspects of the project, mechanically, electrically, the exterior, the glazing, metal panels, the roof, all that. And we've come up with a sizable list. The ones that we are not taking specifically are the photovoltaics on the roof. We're going to retain those. That's a small investment. We are retaining Ryan's LEED Gold presentation they had originally in their BAFO and their goal currently. We are reducing the size and count of the terraces, but really in the same ratio that we're reducing people. And we will most likely retain a rooftop mechanical, but but that is that's getting in the weeds a little bit. We still want to. I would recommend that we still provide the flexibility to your staff to resolve some of the more tactical pieces, and we get our strategy in play for now.
Yeah, but let me just address a few things that we have to discuss as a group and as a board. Is on the parking spaces, and think of close to 100 spaces per floor. We looked at taking out 2 floors, and this gets back to a good neighbor. Melissa Nelson, the state attorney's office, really need parking and really would like 100 spaces if possible, and possibly more. And this is a discussion is, Paul asked me to reach out to Melissa, which I did. She said they can only get approved for year to year what they can pay for parking, but they have investigators coming 2 or 3 times a day. And, we are next door to them, and this will crowd out some of their parking. So they've asked for us if we could dedicate a floor to them, which is $1.5 million. I think it's the right thing to do, but it is worth a discussion. That's number one. Taking out some of these terraces is absolutely the right thing to do. We've got to go back through some part of approvals with the downtown authority. So those are 2. And then on retaining the solar PV and the LEED Gold is not a substantial amount of money, but it gets back to where Paul's trying to head, is making us best in class. And feeling if we are a utility, this is something that we should be a leader in, not a follower. On the rooftop mechanical, I think we can quickly in the next couple of weeks get to, solutions there. But these are things we should talk about and want to get input for the staff and Paul on these issues.
Well, Mr. Chairman, this is Tom. So that addresses a couple of questions I had as I went through. Number one, on the next slide, on the side by side, there's somewhere between 200 and 220 fewer FTEs, and yet the parking between options 2 and 3, the number of parking spaces were the same. So that was curious, but you've answered why. And also the other question I had was sort of the cost benefit analysis, the value relative to LEED Gold versus LEED Silver, and then just had that been assessed. Right? I know we've been through that here in buildings we built as well. And there is some appreciable cost, but again, I appreciate the thought relative to being a leader, given the nature of the business.
Well, Tom, you should know exactly how much being LEED Gold is. Stuart, what is that number? And what is the solar?
$300,000 from gold to silver, and then approximately another 150 if we drop from silver to certified.
Could you say that one more time? Between gold and silver, you broke up just a bit.
Between gold and silver, the savings is I think somewhere right around $300,000.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, but I mean,
Bobby.
Tom, to answer your question, I'm sorry, John, is we were going to take out 2 floors, for that parking when we reduce the facility. So that and we're talking about adding 1 floor back for the neighbors, which, the state attorney are more than just neighbors. John, I apologize. Sorry.
The state attorney are more than just neighbors, but you charge neighbors when you build something for them. What are we going to get a payback on this $1.5 million?
Well, John, to answer your question, is we can charge on an annual basis, but we can't get a long-term return there. So that.
Well, can we get enough on an annual?
Go ahead, Nancy.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but in our discussions with the staff at State's Attorney earlier, we had talked about the employees just paying market rate parking, so they would be monthly parkers and would likely individually pay, and it sounds like there is enough demand from that building. So it wasn't contemplated that we would provide it at no cost, but that they would pay market or just around market rate to be able to park there.
That's true, Nancy. But what they're talking about is the investigators, John, that they're going to need. They don't have a problem paying us, but their budget's approved year to year, and they can't sign a long-term lease as far as that. And that's a big percentage of what we're talking about. Not a big percentage, but it's probably 20 to 30%.
I'm perplexed why we can sign a long-term lease and they can't. And I don't want to get us sidetracked, but I don't want to spend $1.5 million unless we're getting a decent return on it. And I think you can assume that one way or the other, they're going to need the parking and they'll pay us. But if we do market parking, do we get a return? We're not in the parking business.
You make a good point, John. This is something that, we are butting up against them. But the state law doesn't permit them to sign long-term leases as I understand it. So we can dig into it. I'm indifferent. To me, I think we can get a return on that $1.5 million. But it won't be something that is a secure return.
I'm okay with it not being secure if that's not possible, of course, but I want to see what the expectation is for them to pay us and whether it's worth it to us to do it.
Well, and to that end, projects I've been involved in the past, you do reserve some parking spaces for reserved parking, which would be people's choice to have a reserved parking space, so that there might be some economics to carve some of these out for that purpose. And I don't know if that's been contemplated either.
Yeah, but what I understand is that, under state law, they have an annual termination if they don't get appropriation. And, I think we can work through that, but I just want everybody to be aware this is something that is important to the state attorney. I think they'd love to figure out how to pay us, but I don't want people to be, saying that we can take a long-term lease and then they don't get appropriated for a year. So I just want to make sure everybody understands the caveat here.
That's clear, Bobby, and we get that. But I just want to make sure their expectation of what they should pay and our expectation of what they should pay are very clear.
Well, why don't, Nancy, you put that on the list and we will get back and make sure that we can get, what the expectations are as close as possible before we decide. I think we got weeks to decide that, not months. But I think they'll work pretty quickly with us on that.
And of the 100, break it out. How many are the investigators who are in and out, and how many are those could be potentially permanent, individual holders of parking spaces?
Nancy.
That's good. And
go ahead.
CBRE has a lot of data on the rates of the market rate parking, so we can look at that. I think Lori Boyer at DIA also has a lot of data on parking. So we'll try to gather that and then help us have those conversations.
Great points, guys.
Hey, Bobby, you started by mentioning the current economic situation, and I will confirm that capital is constrained for these type of projects right now today. It doesn't mean next month that's going to be different, and we're certainly a credit grade tenant, so that would help with financing of this project. I would like to know if we are concerned about the markets and being able to secure financing for this with our partners.
Yeah, Stuart can answer this, but I'll quickly say that they have a commitment from Wells Fargo that they are supposed to close next month. And what they're concerned about is that, you know, we run past that time. And that's why I think it's worth us moving one way or another on this thing, because I think it's important to not put them in a position where they can't close on this property.
And when you say next month, I mean, what is the exact date of the commitment expiry?
Stuart, do you have that?
Yeah, well, I believe Doug Deek is on the call with Ryan Companies. Doug, you wanna respond to that, please, sir?
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
6/15, June 15th is the date the commitment expires. And we pushed them to extend that as far as they were comfortable. There was definitely some negotiation in that date.
Thank you.
Well, you see, so just to kind of final up the presentation that we put together, that's pretty much the last slide in front of you. And that's just a side-by-side comparison of the variants that we looked at. I think that's it for me for the most part, Bobby.
Paul, do you have some comments to make?
Well, yes, I do, Bobby. I think just in listening to the conversation, there were a couple of points, referencing back to some of the questions on the existing building. During the storm in 17 and 18, the headquarters building was essentially rendered useless. Beyond the storm time, it was really destroyed through a lot of dampness and encroaching of water, roof leaks, floods in the elevators, etc. So we were blocked out of there for probably a week before we could slowly get back in there. So it's not gonna withstand things, and that gave us second thoughts, I think, in terms of, and this was a great opportunity to look at the headquarters. There was some questions raised at the last meeting with respect to hardening, and having a hardening building would be for critical operations. We currently have downtown in the facilities a backup system operation facility for the electric system. And the intent would be to have that for the water and wastewater system too. Some of that, certainly from the electric side, is required by federal codes and restrictions and compliance. So to have the backup site there in a hardened facility where we would have access and an EOC, some other key areas of customer communication, contract workers, and some field engineers that have to come in and deploy. And so there's this sort of expandable space there, but in the hardened facility looking towards the potential of being able to have complete business continuity within the county in the event of significant disruption. Then I would also say that we have some rental facilities now that are hardened, but clearly not sufficient to operate if, in fact, we did have a catastrophic event. All of our computers have now been moved off site. So this economics in terms of the larger building contracting a bit and putting the facility in place and the personnel that would be most appropriately utilized in a crisis situation, as well as having space for emergency operations center, I think really is a good sustainable model, a resilient model for the utility going forward. And it makes sense that we take advantage of this opportunity to go ahead and facilitate that for the long term. And those are my comments. I think the other thing on parking, we'll dig in on the analysis there, and I think there's a way we can put some spreadsheet and potential cash flows and sensitivities around that. The other point there is I've never heard a complaint of anyone that works or goes downtown that there's too much parking. So I think we can get some value at some point, whether hopefully it's with the state's attorney's office, but we'll put some sensitivities around there and make sure that we can realize some revenue going forward. But I thank the board and everybody that's worked so far on this. It's we're almost there. Thank you, Bobby.
No, I appreciate your leadership, Paul. Joe, Tom, I know you've got a hard stop at 10:30, Tom. I just want to, do y'all feel comfortable? Because I think we do have to make, a go or no go decision fairly quickly on the 152,000 feet. I think we can finalize the 40,000 very quickly. My suggestion to the group would be we hire Stewart's group to help us. I think I would suggest and get Paul's comment is that we own this 40,000 plus or minus building, and I don't think we need to hire a developer. I think Stewart's group can get us the specifics of what we need, and we can quickly move forward on that facility. A location is still outstanding. It's something that, like to get some input on, and where that location should be. But I do think Ryan and company has worked with us. I think we've got to, move forward is my suggestion. But I'd like to get Tom's thoughts and Joe's thoughts, and anybody else. I apologize, Leon and John and
That's
Mark.
okay. Actually, Bobby, you answered my question a little bit. So how quickly do we need to make a decision on the 40,000 square foot building, and what do we think is the timeline for that? And, because I assume it has to be in relative parallel, because it can't lag too far behind, because we'll have employees that we need to move around.
Leon, this is my suggestion, and get Stewart's thoughts, but my feeling is we would move fairly quickly on that facility. I think we can move that fairly. If we can find a location, I think we can move very quickly on that location. On that facility. Stewart, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's perfectly correct. Leon, your highest value is going to be to run those concurrently and in parallel.
Correct.
Because at some point you're going to have a building to decommission, and it's better to probably not phase that decommission.
Bobby, what is the plan for the existing building?
I think, this is personal. I think you're going to have to hopefully hold on, and we don't have any, big costs between now and the finishing of we are, and Paul can address this, I think we're in a dangerous situation until this new facilities are built. That, Paul, you might react, because I think you've got a more feeling being in the building and dealing with the building. And the other thing we hadn't talked about is, hurricane season. Right. We got 2 hurricane seasons to live through to get these things finished. But Paul, why don't you address that?
So I think at one time the buildings, as we laid out probably on the first or second slide there, are in significant need of sort of almost demolition level reconstruction and reconfiguring there. So at least at one time, the thought was to, while we were continuing to occupy the space as the new facilities were being built, we would look to market both the facilities and or the land for that period of time, which could be 18 months here. And at the end of that period of time, seeing what the market was and have a better real assessment of whether or not there was going to be the ability to sell the buildings and have somebody else refurbish them for their own use, or to, at that point in time, make sure we set aside reserve for potential demolition and grading, and then just bringing the parcel, if you will, back for redevelopment.
My comment quickly is that I think these buildings need to be demolished.
One last question. What is the headline savings that we have brought from the previous plan?
I would say somewhere between 10 and 14 million, John. And I think we've got to do a little bit more work on that. And that does not include TIs. And we've got to, I'd like to get CB to do some more work. And I think we can get a lot more granular on that number fairly quickly, but we're not there. But I think the number's somewhere between 10 and 14 million dollars.
Okay.
And that includes building the new building too, the 40,000 square foot building?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Hey, Bobby, Joe here.
But let me finish the point for Leon. These are net present value numbers.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
Okay. So not that I'm predisposed with Armageddon, but option 3 looks good, but I'm still concerned about what are the resiliency factors for the new headquarters building? Are we still saying 130 miles per hour resiliency or what? Because I'm still convinced I got it on a separate facility for emergency operation center purposes, which I think is a great idea. But if we're still looking at the specs being 130 miles per hour, I still think that's undue risk.
Stuart, why don't you go through what this entails, or Doug, and then I'll give you my reaction.
Yeah, Doug, you wanna give some thoughts to that?
Sure. This is Doug Deek with Ryan Companies. I would say, Joe, it's a good concern, and location matters a lot when you're talking about hurricane tendencies, patterns, and design criteria. This 130 mile an hour design criteria is over the building code requirement slightly as far as what the design requirements are. If you go to Miami or even to the Florida Keys, you'll see that number go up dramatically. And interestingly, in Jacksonville, the 140 mile an hour line is in the water off the coast of Jacksonville Beach. So I think this 130 mile an hour number, based on the location of, very specifically the location of this building, is adequate and good design.
And Joe, I would add to that. Keep in mind, we've gone through a lot of efforts to make resiliency a focus already. Your gen set design, the finished floor elevation of your building, we've raised by almost 1.5 feet. The civil design from a security and employee safety standpoint, your garage design and its connection to the headquarters, the first floor secure areas and our ability for response and visibility with JSO, and really our improvement in visitor management and access and all of that. So there's been a sizable amount of work with regard to kind of resiliency and hardening of that facility.
I would say to you is under these situations, nobody will be in that building. I mean, so, you know, that's something that just think through. If we had a storm of above 130, nobody will be in that building. So my suggestion,
thank you.
It's adequate.
So, Bobby, this is Tom. I've got just a couple of thoughts, and I think this is extraordinarily well done. I mean, from the perspective of value engineering and the sustainability, risk mitigation, the Emergency Operations Center being in this separate hardened facility, I think all of that is absolutely in the right direction. I appreciate the work very much and support it. I only have two questions. One is, with the have we considered, and is there any further opportunity for individuals to work remotely, i.e. from home? And so I say that with all respect for balancing corporate culture and organizational culture and having the folks together the appropriate amount of time, but at the same time, we've got the number of employees, and we've got some in the bigger building and some will be in the separate building, but is there any further opportunity to value engineering or down the total square footage needed by any functions that could be net performed remotely, particularly given what we've all learned in the last 10 weeks? That's question number one. And then number two is, I think we do need a definitive answer on the parking and the return on that investment. $1.5 million is real money. Want to be good neighbors, but at 15 grand a spot, that there has to be out of fiduciary responsibility for JEA, there has to be an understanding of a real return on that. Understanding there can't be a long-term lease per se, but I don't know. We got to keep all things in balance there.
Tom, there are two good points. Nancy and her team will look at the parking, and John and you both made great points there. And I think Marty made a great point on the TIs of the retail space. That is going to be, worked on quickly is my suggestion to Nancy. On the, the size, I think you've got two issues that are moving, and I think we tried to balance it, and I give CB, which is on top of this, a lot of credit. One is, how much spacing do you need? And then the other is, what is really going to happen with people working remotely? And Stuart, you might just give the answer, but that's something I drilled down very quickly is, what is the balance there? But remember, we're building a 20-year asset, and I think this is as good as we're going to be able to do with, I started and spent a lot of time on this issue internally in my mind, but I think we've come to a good point of this balance of what this should be. And remember, we're in a building that is a ticking time bomb. Yeah.
Bobby, this is Paul. If I may, just in terms of addressing the remote workplace, and a great point, and we're talking about that already as we think about our bringing folks back to work, our return to work strategies and policies. The question has come up. We believe we've been fairly effective working remotely in a variety of portions of the operation. The big question is, can we sustain that over time? And so currently in this emergency status, I think we've done well, but I've asked the team, and we're going to take about 90 days, unfortunately, to really dig into this, both from an efficiency standpoint and can we really think about this going forward. But we've got to look in terms of continuity. We've got to look in terms of we are in the government, and so it is a matter of regulations in terms of pay, performance, tracking, monitoring the work performed, as well as the disbursement of funds, and then the disbursement and utilization of government assets, the computer systems, et cetera, at remote sites of people's homes. And so we've got to think through a number of those areas to make sure that we do it right on all fronts. And we'll be bringing that back to the board for further discussion as we go forward. But I think we're going to need probably about 90 days to really wrap that up, think that through, get best practices in the government municipal setting, and come forward with some recommendations. Thanks, Bobby.
Those are all excellent points. I'd also offer, we're thinking through this in our business as well. And, insofar as we've been extraordinarily productive in this last 10 weeks with a lot of folks working remotely, we're asking ourselves, again, what does the future of work look like? And, how much of our success in the last 10 weeks working remotely is a function of the fact that we already had relationship built and culture built. And so these are people that know each other well, that are working off site and making it work. What does that look like as over time you have succession and turnover and new people that come in that don't ever work right together? And can you build that same sort of unity and culture? Open question, but I completely appreciate that.
Really great point. Thanks.
Marty, Leon, John, do you have any further points?
Well, I don't want to lose sight of, the dialogue around LEED gold versus silver. And I would advocate for gold. I mean, we should hold ourselves to the highest standard. And I would also advocate for the solar resiliency as well. I just think that we need to put as much effort into this building it's as we would want all of our ratepayers to.
And my only comment, I would agree with Tom. I think the work from home future of people teleworking is going to continue to be there. It's probably going to continue to grow. We just have to figure out how to make that work, and new building, new structure, but also to continue to keep the connection to the culture of the organization.
But interesting timing, though, right, Leon? No building in the country has been able to start from scratch, and even looking at flex space where teams could rotate in and out. I'm kind of jealous. I wish I could do that at my locations. I'm kind of stuck with the build out that we already have.
Yep.
And I just want to weigh in, and I agree with Marty relative to LEED gold versus silver. I mean, you articulated the incremental expense, and I think the benefits outweigh that incremental expense.
I just want to mention this. This is this is part of John's leadership and Paul's leadership, but we were in intense negotiation with Ron and CB, and Paul tapped me on the shoulder about the LEED and the solar and said, Bobby, we're going to be best in class. And that says a lot about our new leader in John Baker. So, Paul, was very thoughtful in this whole process, made some great suggestions on how we save monies, but I think on important issues, he wants to be best in class, which states the kind of leader we have right now.
And Bobby, relative to next steps on timing, I'm mindful of that June 15th date with the commitment on the financing. If you look at the calendar, are you suggesting that we would vote on this at the next board meeting, which would be well within that targeted date?
I think it's only fair to give them, I would suggest we do something next week to quickly approve this, to give them as much time to, I just know, and I mean, all you guys know what it takes to close loans these days. I think it's fair that we go ahead and move forward on the 152,000 feet. We, as John Baker says, we look at that $1.5 million of additional floor of parking and look at, what is the right thing to do there, which I think we can approve this contingent on that and move on that fairly quickly. I would give staff, my suggestion is to give Paul and John the ability to move either forward of taking out 2 floors or 1 floor, that is, I mean, I think we need to do the work, but at the end of the day, I feel very comfortable that Paul and John can figure out what we do. So my suggestion is we move forward on the 152,000 feet. We try to go back quickly on making the changes we need from DIA. And we give John and Paul the ability to make the decision on whether we take out 2 floors, or 1 floor. That would be my recommendation to you guys.
2 floors or 1 floor in the garage, Bobby, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Jody, is that do we need to have a full board meeting next week to do that, or can this committee do that?
It would need to be a board action item. I hate to tell you guys that, but from what exactly will we have to do from the lease terms with Ryan? There's some amendment type document things that we're going to have to put together, and it should be a full board approval. It could be a quick meeting next week to do that with the full board. We can get all the materials put together and get a new special board meeting put together for that action to take place next week.
Let's do it.
Any other comments, guys?
Other than thank you, Bobby, this has been very helpful. I'm so glad we had this briefing.
No, I thank the team. I think, I give Ryan, and I know, they have really given in this situation, in a very trying situation that we live in today. CB, Richard Ellis, both Mike Harrell and Stuart Green have been fantastic, and Nancy has been great. And I just feel good. We have a great team that we have. So the accolades should go to those guys. They've worked tireless to get to where we are today. And I tell you, the points that have been made by all board members have been thought through by this group, and very, taken where we are today. And Marty, to your point on, like the TIs, a lot of that stuff is going to get pretty granular to where we can get a better sense of what we can do on TIs on the retail of the parking. And I think we can get pretty granular pretty quickly on, can we increase those savings, but still being smart from that 10 to 14 million net present value number. If there's no other comments, we'll adjourn this meeting, and thank you guys.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you, Bobby.